Welcome once again to today's webinar, Advancing Offshore CO₂ Storage in Portugal. Today we have three speakers for you. This is the project's second webinar overall, but it's the first one in a 5-part series we're running this autumn. I will include a link in the chat to the website where you can find more information and you can register for all other webinars. Today we have three speakers, Júlio Carneiro from the University of Évora, João Casacão from GALP, and Ala Delicado from the Institute of Social Sciences at the University of Lisbon. So I would like now to hand over to Júlio for the first presentation. Júlio, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, Richard. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll try to share my screen. Just give me a second. Can you confirm if you see my screen, Richard?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so my name is Júlio Carneiro. I'm from the University of Évora. I am coordinating in Portugal the PilotSTRATEGY project, which means that essentially I'm going to present the work of a lot of people from the team, including from the University of Évora, from GALP, and from the Institute of the Ciências Sociais, although João and Ana will also clarify exactly what they are doing in more detail. What I'm going to present is, I'll start just by a very brief presentation of the PilotSTRATEGY project, in case you haven't heard about it yet. Going through the motivations and the scenarios that we developed for CCUS in Portugal and in the Lusitanian basin, and try to explain why we went to the offshore option and what kind of work we are doing there. Finally, I want to finish with the barriers and challenges and what we are trying to do to overcome that until the end of the project. About PilotSTRATEGY project. So it is funded by European Commission. It's a Horizon 2020 project, 5 years project. It started in 2021 and it runs until April 2026. And the aim of it is essential to characterize in detail CO₂ storage pilots in deep saline aquifers in Southern and Eastern Europe. We are aiming to study and characterize in details pilot sites in Portugal, in the Lusitanian basin, in the Ebro basin in Spain, and in the Paris basin in France. But apart from designing those pilot sites, we are also aiming to improve the knowledge about the storage capacity and the storage complexes in Greece and in Poland. So there are plenty of partners, as you can see down here, and we are also supported by partners from Germany, from our institute, and from the United Kingdom and the University of Edinburgh. They are providing support in some of the tasks. In the end, we aim to do the full analysis and the full studies up to the front-end engineering design for the CO₂ storage sites. That should allow, when we come to the end of the project, for any entity that is interested in storing CO₂ in any of the target regions to do a final investment decision. So we're doing the full process. We're including the technical evaluation, the characterization of the sites, designing it. We're also assessing the risks involved, the safety and performance. We are doing a detailed investment proposal and studying the full life cycle of the pilot, so all the economics required. We have a very strong communication dissemination activity. This is part of this webinar is part of that communication activity, and we put a lot of importance in the social acceptance and stakeholders participation. There's a full work package about that. Each of the regions has a regional stakeholder committee with whom we meet regularly, and that Anna will talk a bit in the third presentation. We also look at the legal framework in each of the countries, because we are supposed also to address permitting and approval for the sites. So this is about what we're trying to do in PilotSTRATEGY. But why are we trying to do it in Portugal? Well, just briefly, because Portugal has a carbon neutrality roadmap that initially was aiming for carbon neutrality by 2050. Now it is, it is occurring in other countries, being revised for 2045, sorry. We also have a national hydrogen strategy that was put forward in 2020 that relies a lot on in the production of e-fuels, which means CO₂ utilization and capture is an important part of it. But now we are in the process, in the process of approval of the revised National Energy and Climate Plan for 2030. And amongst it, for the first time in the official regulations and official documentation for Portugal in terms of decarbonization, CCS is mentioned in the PNEC 2030 in the revised version. Now it is considered, as we've been stressing for quite a long time, that CCS is required in Portugal in hard-to-abate industries, namely in cement, the lime sector, and the chemical sectors are areas in which to achieve the decarbonization targets, we really need CCUS. And maybe in the pulp and paper sector, there is also a business model related to negative emissions, since they are pretty much involved in utilizing biomass as an energy source. So bags could be relevant also for Portugal. In a way, so this is the motivations, but it was also clear from previous studies in which we have been doing in Portugal that the scenarios to be built should rely essentially on capturing CO₂ in the cement and lime facilities, in the pulp and paper sectors, and in the glass factories. This map is actually from a previous project called Strategy CCUS, but PilotSTRATEGY builds on that strategy, develop it there. And this is the area and the point sources that we aim to capture CO₂ and transport to store it offshore. So from 2028 and 2050, our ambition was to start in 2028 with pilots that have been actually suggested or proposed by the industry in a cement plant here and in a glass plant in 2028. And so the objective was to provide a storage place that allows us also to test our storage facilities and storage possibilities offshore. So that's part of the pilot strategy. That's what we aim here, to provide at the first, as a first step, a pilot injection site for the capture facilities that should start in the cement and glass sectors. And so there was a full plan to this. You can see the evolution of the plan if you go into this website, into the Strategy CCUS website. You can play with an online tool to check what is the planned evolution of CCUS in Portugal. In total, by 2050, we should be capturing around 93 million tons of CO₂, of which up to 70 million tons would be stored offshore, and the remaining would be for the utilization in the national green hydrogen strategy. By 2055, in this region, we would be capturing CO₂ in all the cement facilities and in the glass facilities and pulp and paper facilities in some cases of them. In total, capturing by 2045, 9.1 million tons per year, storing 4.7 million tons per year, and utilizing 4.4. I just want to stress here that the pilot phase of the strategy as a whole, but also of this project in particular, PilotSTRATEGY. What we aim initially, and João will later on discuss this in more detail, is to start injecting a relatively small quantity that would be captured in this cement facility, so Zelas, and in this VA glass facilities down here. Transport of the, so less in total, you would see here the amounts to be captured. In total, less than 100,000 tons per year to be captured and transport in this pilot scale by train up to the port of Figueira da Foz. And in the port of Figueira da Foz, then we would have transport either by pipeline or by ship. In this case, also a pilot ship with the capacity that we are engaged in a different project to inject directly from the ship and to avoid the necessity, the need in this pilot phase to build offshore pipeline infrastructure. So for flexibility, essentially. Why did we went to the offshore option? Well, we went through a multi-criteria approach. We analyzed all the geological information in terms of the technical criteria, storage capacity, the containment capacity of the formations, the integrity of the seal, and also looked at the risks of the seismicity, for instance. And we looked, and it was very relevant for us, the possibility to upscale from the pilot scale to the commercial scale. That was pretty much important for us because the capacity onshore is much lower than offshore. But we also looked at non-technical criteria, social, economic, regulatory, and in the end, taking into account all these criteria and the data quality, we thought that going for the offshore was the best solution for Portugal. And in fact, we chose a structure just offshore from Figueira da Foz. This is a map, an interpretation of the structure of the top of the reservoir, which is our target reservoir, is the lower Cretaceous siliciclastics capped by argillaceous limestones and shales from the Cassin Formation. It is about 20 kilometers from the Figueira da Foz port. And the main risks that we already knew was that there is an abandoned well over there from the 1960s, so quite old, and some faults that we have mapped, obviously by interpreting the existing 3D seismics and 2D seismics. And the important thing, relevant thing here is that this particular structure, although small, it allows us to upscale to commercial scale in the future. So it didn't make any sense for us to design a pilot offshore without considering that it will go commercial. So in the end, our design that João will describe in the next talk is actually for the commercial scale rather than for the pilot. So we did interpret all the existing information, build a detailed static model. Our reservoir has an average porosity of 22%, permeability average, obviously, from around 200 millidarcy. It's not too deep, the water column, 85 meters deep, and the reservoir, it's just on enough to ensure that it will be in supercritical state when injecting the CO₂. It's also quite thick, the reservoir, nearly in some cases about more than 300, or usually more than 300 meters. We have been optimizing right now, or we finished very recently, the optimization of the injection site. One of the main concerns this was the existence of this legacy well, which the status of which we don't know exactly how it was abandoned. And the other concerns were the faults, these lines here that you see mapped. So we've been with this detailed static model, we've been just conducting multiple realizations of the model to testing different well locations in actually 948 iterations to find the most appropriate well location to maximize injection rate, but also minimizing the risk of leakage from the faults. So to keep the plume away from the faults, and also to keep the plume away as further away as from the legacy well as possible. Obviously, this also taking into account the pressure buildup. So the location of the well is now defined, which means that GALP can now start designing in detail the well, and considering also the costs involved for the well location, which is this one here in yellow. Okay, so that was the task that we just finished last month. We are very aware that having chose to go offshore, this raises some challenges and some barriers. One of them is that regulatory aspects offshore are more challenging in Portugal than offshore. CCUS directive is implemented in Portugal, whether it is for onshore or offshore facilities for storage, but offshore activities require that CO₂ storage is included in the maritime special planning. In the existing version, it is not considered because at the time it was not a priority activity, but that does not mean that the CO₂ storage cannot be done. It simply we have to apply and demonstrate that it has no significant impacts. We are also very aware that storage costs for offshore are much higher than for onshore, and that's why we want to go commercial and designing already for commercial. And one of the important aspects that we have been also that have been constraining or not constraining, guiding the project is the interaction with the local communities and the local stakeholders. And in their meetings with the regional stakeholder committee, for instance, it has been their concerns have been very clear, and we are trying to take that into account in designing our project. For instance, Figueira da Foz, our target region, the economy is very much dependent on tourism. It's very much dependent on fishing. So it depends on very much on maritime activities. We need to take that into account, their concerns into account. And we're doing that. We're trying to minimize impacts by looking at options that don't need it, for instance, a platform for injection, or that don't require, at least at the pilot stage, a pipeline. And we're also trying to find out to find other monitoring techniques that don't require 3D seismics in a systematic manner, because that was one of the main concerns that the fishermen have raised in the meetings with us. So we have been developing, trying to find solutions to this in other projects, either by transport by ship, or by looking for innovative techniques in other projects that the University of Évora is looking for. This we still have a lot of work to be done. Okay, and we have to supposed to finish in 2026. GALP is just finishing the preliminary well design and cost review. João will talk about that in a minute, but we still have to analyze and quantify all the risks and then the reservoir performance. We just finished the seismicity monitoring, we had a network of stations to monitor seismicity in the region. As expected, it is relatively small compared to the other regions in Portugal, but we need also to develop the strategies and scenarios for the whole design, including the monitoring, measuring, and verification planning. In the end, we have to address how the environment, to do environmental and economic assessments, and to come up with an investment proposal and the licensing process. So up to April 2026, we still have a lot of work to be done, but I think the progress is it's quite significant up to now. So yeah, that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Júlio, for your presentation. We'll now move on to our second speaker for today, João Casacão from GALP. João, you should be able to share from your end. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard. Hi, everyone. Let me know if you see the screen.
Yeah, that's all good. Thank you.
Yeah. So WP4 is the work package that deals mostly with the development plans regarding the storage sites. We've been taking care of this for the last year or so on a higher level. Okay, so taking into account what was considered by the modeling team, most of that. I'll start by putting out the framing of the project with the goals and the main assumptions that we are considering. Okay, so as Júlio said, we're considering a reservoir 20 to 25 kilometers offshore Figueira da Foz, which is a portuary town in western Portugal. We are considering CO2 sourcing and transport, but not in a very detailed way. We're mostly taking into account what was estimated by the previous project strategy CCUS. But we assumed since the beginning that this project wouldn't make sense to be just a pilot, but also commercial upscaling when compared to the Spanish, the French, and Poland, and the other teams of this consortium. Makes sense because we are the only ones that are going offshore, and that takes the costs really high, so it makes sense to consider the commercial upscaling. We are considering two phases, so a pilot phase in the beginning, 3 to 5 years, and then the commercial upscale. We are considering also the modeling, the subsurface modeling, and also above ground characterization. This is most for the WP4 for our work package that we are considering now. One injection well at this stage in the pilot phase, but the possibility to consider a second well in injection for the future. We also are considering putting the options on the table regarding pipeline and versus shipping, as Júlio said again, with the infrastructural support of the Figueira da Foz port, and also in the meantime increasing the stakeholder engagement on what concerns to CCS, which Anna will talk later on. Okay, so regarding point sources, I grabbed this figure on the right-hand side from the past project strategy CCUS, which basically identified what would be the main sources locally to grab the CO2, okay, for possible storage sites. We can see that the most, as Júlio said, most industry sectors are within cement, glass, paper, and pulp. So we are basically considering this on the left-hand side figure. We're considering the cement factory of Sozelas, the Navigator paper and pulp industry, and also BA glass further south, okay? So this is a sketch of where we are in terms of the prospect outline, the CCS well. This we grabbed also from the modeling part from Évora. They did the refinements, hundreds of refinement exercises, and we grabbed the most optimal location for the injection. Okay, we'll go further into that in the next slides. And we also have to take into account possible places within the Figueira da Foz port. We make some connections with several other projects analog to this around Europe, most specifically. Northern Lights is a reference for our case, despite having a magnitude much higher than us in terms of facilities, in terms of scalability. But I'll go to that in the end as well. Some of the locations are here, but are basically possible locations still to be addressed with the Figueira da Foz port. And just a reminder for everyone, this is just a design phase, and this will be coming out as a recommendation by the end of the project. So the basis of design considers the pilot and the commercial phase. As you can see, due to the regulatory framework that we have, we consider pilot to be up to 100,000 tons of CO2 injection from 3 to 5 years. This will be for commercial and pilot onshore dense phase from the Figueira da Foz port to the storage site. And we are privileging the pipeline solution here in this matter, but shipping is also an alternative that we are considering, despite being less mature and harder to, more uncertain, because there are few analogs that we can use to design the solution, but we are still considering the shipping solution, okay? So we are considering an offshore pipeline from the Figueira da Foz temporary offloading station, or a compression station to pump the CO2 and to pressurize the CO2 into an optimal pressure before getting shipped or by pipeline to the storage site. In terms of pipeline, we could consider in the beginning a pipeline with a less diameter, 4-inch, But as we said, it doesn't make sense to project and to design this whole project for the pilot, but also for the commercial. So we are considering the 8-inch solution by now. Subsea wellheads manifolds could be also will be also considered for the stage to structure the development scenarios for CCS, as well as wells. Okay, so we are considering one well at this stage for the pilot, but the team will be working on the modeling of a second injection well in order to optimize the volumes that can be withheld within the storage site. So regarding the alternative concept, as Júlio mentioned, also shipping, we are making the connection with the CTS project, which is another research project that Universidade of Évora is also working on as well. So there are multiple possibilities having a ship directly injecting CO2 within the storage site, or shipping to Figueira da Foz, to the temporary offloading station, and then from there onwards, either by pipeline or by ship to the storage point. Okay, so this shipping actually offers some advantages regarding flexibility, regarding scalability, and we can actually cluster different CO2 sources within this regional area from the southern to northern Iberia. We also took into account some other issues regarding the connection between the subsurface modeling and the above ground. You can see on the left-hand side what would be the scenario after a 30-year injection of CO2 within this storage site. You can see that the plume, the CO2 plume that is depicted here in blue, doesn't reach the legacy well. This is one of the risks that were identified by the team, and also by these two faults that bound the storage site. Another exercise made by the team was to consider what would be the fate of the CO2 on a longer term. So we can see here a model after 1,000 years of injection of CO2, what would be the plume of CO2 within the reservoir. And in this case, we are quite on the safe side, and this is why we chose this location. One of the reasons that we chose this location to be the injection site. So this also is important for us in order to think about scalability and the definition of a second well to optimize the storage volumes. So regarding well assumptions, this is still preliminary, okay? So we are right now considering a jackup, given that this is a shallow water depth environment. This will be the most easiest and the most cost-benefit solution for our case. We are talking about 85 meters of water depth, so very shallow waters here, and compared to the Northern Sea, which is quite parallel to that. And this works with the dry tow vessel that you can see one of the examples over here that basically tows this platform wherever it's needed. And you can see here on the right-hand side what would be the design of the well for the CCS for our case. Okay, you can see different colors meaning different targets. So reservoir would be on this yellow color here. We would consider the primary seal of Casacão formation and also a secondary seal of the Évora group to contain this storage site. Okay. We made also reference to not to put the section breaks within the interfaces of the main interfaces between the seal and the reservoir, and also consider the injectivity test to be around this depth of 1,180 meters, which is quite aligned with the modeling that the team is doing as well. And we also want to de-risk somehow the subsurface and to increase our knowledge on the subsurface part on the reservoir and the seal, which is one of the main uncertainties on our side, with some core intervals between the reservoir and the main seal depth. So going back to the local infrastructure, just wanted to make some similarities, some benchmark with Northern Lights. Okay, with some people here at the project call it this mini Northern Lights project. We can see here on the right-hand side what is the aspect of the Northern Lights in Norway. We are considering something probably similar to this on our scale. They basically consider 12 storage tanks to pressure the CO2 before going into the pipeline. You can see here how it works. They inject the CO2 further away, 100 kilometers away from the onshore facility, and they use the storage pumps to compress the CO2 before that. Okay, so we probably wouldn't need that amount of tanks. This has an impact on costs as well, and we are right now dealing with those technicalities to address the cost structure for the project. So when we compare Northern Lights with PilotSTRATEGY, there are some similarities, some differences. Most of all, the pipeline, which it's a major advantage for our side because it's much less extensive than in Northern Lights. The volumes are also different as well, as you might expect. We are considering only 100K tons on the pilot, but the upscaling into 16 million tons over 30 years. This number, this is a message that we wanted to pass here, is just due to that optimal location that the modeling team provided. Okay, doesn't mean that the structure can only withhold that amount of CO2. This can be addressed on a later stage and to upscale even more the commercial part. Okay. So we have some differences mostly regarding the legacy infrastructures, which is in Norway, it's much more developed than here in Portugal. We don't have much sinks, we don't have much knowledge on the subsurface part. So that is an uncertainty and the risk that we need to tackle as well. But the dimensioning and the project scale are the most things that are different from Norway. So this is the end of the presentation from our side. We are in this moment trying to get other analogs as Portos, for instance, to compare and to get some values of some ideas of the cost structure would be, as well as the technicalities of each project to compare it with us and to further mature the project. Thank you.
Thank you, João, for your presentation. We can now hand over for our last speaker today, Ana Delicado, from the Institute of Social Sciences at the University of Lisbon. Ana?
Thank you, Richard. I'll be brief because we already did a webinar on social acceptance, and we don't have a lot of new information. Just as a recap, the methodology we are using to understand social acceptance, and here I underline the word understand, because our role is to do research on this, not to promote social acceptance. So first we did a median document analysis to try to assess what was the perceptions on CCUS in Portugal. Then we started doing interviews with stakeholders at the national and local level. And first we had a broader scope of analysis because there were two locations under study, one offshore location and another one offshore. And afterwards we narrowed down to the offshore option because that's what our technical partners ascertained would be the better option. We did also a survey of the local population, and we will repeat it next year. And then we set up a regional stakeholder committee, which has been meeting regularly since the beginning of the project. The composition has been slightly changed to incorporate new members after the choice of the location. And more recently, we started to conduct citizen engagement with residents from Figueira da Foz. Just a brief overview of the results we found with the survey. Of course, we have to bear in mind that 90% of the people we interviewed had no idea what CCS was. And so we had to include in the survey a brief explanation of the technology. And afterwards, the views were mostly positive. And I advise caution in interpreting this data because it was a really, really brief explanation, and It was a telephone survey, so it's more difficult to provide more information and to have a better discussion of the technology. So we can only look at this data as indicative. We ascertained that there's a strong division between those who accept CCS and more onshore than offshore, which surprised us, because I think that offshore is less well known and there are more potential environmental impacts. We had a fairly good and positive impression in terms of economic impact and environmental impacts. And of course, we also added some questions about whether citizens should participate in the discussion and in the decision. And of course, the majority of people are quite in favor of this citizen participation. Unlike other countries, in Portugal, there's a high level of trust in scientists and NGOs, which can be a favorable thing for this project, if not for the technology in itself. Regarding the perceptions of stakeholders, we've been having online and face-to-face meetings with them, and we can ascertain that there's a general goodwill in favor of the project. We have not been able to get government officials to commit to a favorable or unfavorable position towards CCS. They have participated in some meetings, not all of them, but always with they consider themselves observers, not really interveners in these discussions. Of course, we have several emitters that are quite interested in the development of the technology and that are quite in favor of moving this project forward. The local authority in Figueira da Foz has also been very supportive. They are interested both in terms of developing the local economy, but I think mostly is to have a research project that is taking place in their place, and it's bring science and innovation into the city. Local economic actors, for instance, the Port Authority, are also interested in the business opportunities that can be brought upon by the CCS in close by. Environmental NGOs, they have the same position everywhere, I think. They are not strongly against it, but I think that's due mainly to the fact that they don't believe this is feasible, or that this is something that will occur in the next few years. Some are more concerned with the risks for marine ecosystems. Others, the usual argument that CCS is a distraction from other climate solutions. We had to include a specific type of stakeholder which would be directly affected by the technology offshore, which are the fishermen. They have participated in some meetings and they are not against the project, but they have some concerns mostly regarding seismic monitoring. They are much more concerned with the possibility of setting up offshore wind farms in the places where they fish. So in relative terms, CCS is not a concern for them. Finally, the residents. We did a face-to-face workshop in February of this year. It was our first approach to local residents. We did an open invitation. We sent out letters to a lot of local organizations that had no particular interest in CCS. We tried to get a wide ranging of participants, but at the end we only managed to have 9 participants, which is a small, non-representative sample, but they were quite vocal. They were very well prepared, most of these participants. They did their homework. They searched for information about CCS, so they already came with an informed opinion on the technology. Some were quite against CCS. They mostly belong to environmental organizations or have mostly environmental concerns. They also talked about the techno-solutionism for climate change, which they are against. They also consider that this can be a greenwashing for fossil fuel industries. They are concerned with the energy needs of this technology and with the risks. At the end, we tried to get a more definite opinion on them. And they are divided between being completely contrary to CCS, and others express some acceptance. They don't think it's an ideal solution, but they are willing to tolerate a well-managed project. Our next steps will be to perform an online regional stakeholder committee meeting in November, possibly to present projects that are being carried out in other countries, because that is something that some stakeholders expressed an interest in. We will do a face-to-face meeting next spring, and we will also get the result of a second round of public opinion survey in the spring. But in this time, it will be more localized in the offshore region in the city of Figueira da Foz. Finally, we're still debating which format we will use to get a wider citizen engagement, to go beyond these very engaged, very opinionated citizens and try to broaden the discussion to local residents in order to be, I wouldn't say it's never representative, but at least to have more diversity of opinions so that we can better assess the social acceptance. And that's all for me.
Thank you, Anna, for your presentation. Questions have been coming in through the chat and the Q&A panel, so we can dive straight in. I'd like to invite today's speakers to please turn on your video cameras and enable your microphones as well for the questions. I'll start taking them in the order they arrive. A reminder that for anyone who would like to ask their questions verbally, they can do so. I will allow the mic for attendees just now, so please leave them muted. And raise your hand, and we'll deal with the requests as they come, and we can enable video as well if relevant. I'll start with a question in the chat that came through. I'm not sure if it's specific to any particular information presented today, but it says, how would this information be available for project promoters? There's a reference to results on the website as well, and a question specifically about the 3.3, but I don't know if there's additional information that any of the speakers can mention that might be available elsewhere for project promoters.
So the vast majority of the results produced in the project, both for the Portuguese region and for the other regions, are public. Are public deliverables that are submitted to the Commission, and then the Commission makes them available. Apart from that, there are also those that are public. They will also be available on the project website. Some of them are already there. There are some of the information that is considered either confidential or of interest for some of the partners, and that information is part of what we call the project exploitation plan that is still being developed, which identifies amongst the project partners which ones have interest in a given particular kind of information, and if that information can be commercialized or used by other partners. So the best way then is to contact, in case you want some further information. For Portugal is to contact me, for instance, and for I guess the same for Spain and France is to contact the local coordinators and to find out exactly what kind of information you need, and if it is publicly available or it can be supplied in some way. About D3.3 you mentioned, Richard?
Yeah, there was a question, but I think you've answered it on the chat as well, Júlio.
Okay.
I just remind everyone else that we also have the project has a Zenodo community set up. I'll put the link in the chat as well, where deliverables are also published. So if anyone interacts with that and collaborates through that, you can find the deliverables for the project on there as well. I'll move on to questions on the Q&A panel. There's first was sent as a set of 4, maybe 5 questions with an added one, so I'll go one by one. How can you ensure that CO2 remains contained in storage fields after injection? And I guess a follow-up to that, are there assurances that the CO2 won't eventually leak out of the storage fields?
Do I go for that? Do you want to go for that, João?
I can complement, but yeah. You can go, Júlio. I can complement.
Yeah. Okay. So industry. Obviously, an important question. How do we ensure we monitor? So we have plans for monitoring the CO₂ plume to ensure that its behavior as predicted by our models. In any case, we're not doing. We're using best practices of an industry that is doing this same kind of injection and storage for quite a long time. So when it is consolidated research and demonstrated in a lot of projects, I think each year around 40 million tons of CO₂ are injected nowadays, and so that's a lot of practice in terms of injecting CO₂ and monitoring its behavior in the subsurface. Even the existing regulations, the CCUS directive in the European Union imposes a certain degree of monitoring and a certain degree of best practices that obviously we are following, characterizing the sites and then monitoring them. That's it.
Yeah, Júlio, I can just compliment on that, just reinforcing your message that on monitoring, the monitoring side, that's like a passive take or passive approach on the issue. I mean, there is no actually an active approach to deal with this in our case. I mean, it's just a matter of frequently monitoring the storage site, either with 3D seismic or 4D seismic along a long time, with VSPs, I mean, with sensors along the well. But the actual fate of the plume of the CO₂ in the longer term is it's a $1 million question for everyone that's doing the CCS projects around the world. We can only learn from the analogs that we have. We have Sleipner, you have Snøhvit, you have some of the places that are already with some decades of injection of CO₂. But yeah, we're not shooting in the dark here. We will present a mitigation plan for these events, but we are also taking this in account when we are considering the development phase and the injections depth as well. Places within the reservoir that can delay the advance of the plume vertically and also horizontally, and moving away from critical zones that we think that will be escapers for CO₂, such as faults or any other geological structures.
Thank you, João and Júlio. I just want to add as well that on the project website, there are, I'll pop a link in the chat. So there's a frequently asked questions document in English in the About the Project page that deals with a lot of these questions, particularly one that we can address in a little bit about any effects that could impact marine life and so on in the case of a leak and so on. And also, I'll put another link in the chat, which is directly for the regions. So in this second link that I'm sharing just now, there's a map with pins on each one of the regions that the project is dealing with, and each one of them has a relevant frequently asked questions document as well in the regional language. So we'll have one in French, Portuguese, Spanish, Greek, and Polish. And some of the questions within them are actually region specific and based on concerns raised by the regions and yeah, concerns specific to the areas. I'll move on to another question in that group of questions that we had. So what is the estimate cost per ton of CO₂ injection, considering the cost of building all required infrastructure and the ongoing operational expenses? Are there any indicative values provided?
Well, I could have the answer for that, but I'm afraid I can't give you now because this is actually ongoing work. So I won't be compromising with the value, with certain value. But we are at this time considering the cost structures, but we don't have still a proper value to share with. Okay, that will be shared briefly, I would say.
But if I can complement what we
but
have,
you can complement, yes,
yeah.
yes,
So what
based
we
on the previous projects, yeah.
Yeah, on the strategy CCUS, which does not have the detailed calculations that João and his team are doing, but the full and the cost estimated for not for this for the pilot injection site that we are designing in pilot strategy, but for the full network of capture and storage that I showed in my presentation up to 2050, the cost estimated calculated at the time in that project was that so capture, transport, utilization, and storage would cost about 70 to 86 euros per ton of CO2 avoided. That is up to 2050. So 70 to 86 euros per ton of CO2 avoided.
Thank you. I'll just turn
Obviously,
to a question.
Sorry, Richard. Obviously, what GALP team is doing right now is actually doing this at an engineering level. That was not the purpose in the other project, which is much higher level estimates.
Just want to turn the attention to a question for Anna. Question says 29% of respondents were not in favor of economic compensation. Why do you think that is?
The question was not whether they would get should get economic compensation, is whether they believe that would have economic benefits, the project. And almost a third believe it doesn't, because they have the experience, for instance, of renewable energy projects, which are very successful here, and but people are aware that they don't benefit from them directly, and they are pretty sure that they will not benefit directly from these projects. And there's some skepticism about whether local communities really benefit from these sort of infrastructures. So I think that's probably the reason that explains these figures.
Thank you, Anna. Couple of questions here that relate a little bit more about I guess, risks and monitoring. Firstly, can you give an overview of the monitoring techniques that are considered at this stage? What are the pros and cons of these techniques? And related question there, how can the cap rock sealing integrity, how has the cap rock sealing integrity been assessed?
Okay, so first question, we still haven't actually started the task on the designing the monitoring network. That will be done once we have finished the design of the pilot site of the injection well. But the monitoring will be different for the pilot scale and for the commercial scale. For the volumes injected in the pilot scale are relatively small, which means you have to monitor essentially very close to the injection well, in sensors within the well itself, and monitoring the subsea, the sea bottom right next to the well, as the plume will propagate, will be relatively small in size. And as for the long-term commercial scale, when we actually have to monitor the plume, a large-scale plume, well, the most common method to do it, as João already mentioned, it is time-lapse seismics. So seismic surveys every once in a while to track the evolution of the plume. One of the concerns, and that we are trying to find out ways to avoid or alternative ways to do it, is that the fishermen in the area do not are obviously, their activity is affected by the 3D seismic campaigns, 3D seismic surveys. They cannot go fishing while that is occurring. So there are constraints even to ship movement in the area. So it is one of the main concerns that they have raised. We are trying to look at new techniques involving either seismic noise or constant monitoring stations at sea bottom to be able to track the CO2 plume without having to go there and do the 3D seismics, although it might not be avoidable. In the end, it could happen that we do not find an alternative because it is a proven technique. That's how it is being done in other parts of the world, in other projects. So it's a proven technique. In other projects, we're trying to find out alternatives, but let's see what we can find. As for the caprock integrity, so we did do some, actually our colleagues from the University of Edinburgh did do a reactivity, CO₂ reactivity tests in samples that we sent them of the caprock, and so they placed those rocks in contact with brine and CO₂ to track what would be the chemical reactions. We are now in the process of modeling those interactions to try to understand if they are important for the integrity of the seal. We are also conducting very detailed mapping, again resorting to the 3D seismics that we have in the area, very detailed 3D mapping of fractures in networks that could occur in our caprock. Fortunately, the base of the caprock, the base of the Cascais formation in the area is more shaly than the top of the formation, which is more carbonated. So we are assessing that. It is part of the work to be done during next year, is to model actually the interaction of the CO₂ if it gets in contact with the caprock.
Thank you, Júlio. May have time for one or two more questions. Another question here. Really interesting presentations. Thank you. Has there been plans for who takes responsibility of the sites post-closure and injection? I ask as we have observed that the governments have typically assumed this responsibility and therefore try to ensure project developers bear most of the capex, particularly with installation of monitoring equipment.
Go ahead, João. Do you want to go ahead?
Well, I can give just a brief response to that. That has been a hot topic within the industry regarding who takes the blame for CO₂ losses, eventual CO₂ losses within the CCUS project. This is still quite new. Discussions are obviously very relevant. I mean, the comment is based on the responsibility take by the states. I guess in the future this will be a shared responsibility take between the operators and the states. But I still think this is a regulatory gap that needs to be filled up.
Yeah, we've been trying. Yeah. Anna said before that one of the challenges we've been facing is to have a clarification from the Portuguese government on this kind of issue. So and on their view about CCUS, which obviously relates to the question and how what kind of incentive that could exist, and we haven't been able so far to connect with them and clarify that issue. Right, Anna? That's it. So we don't have a clear reply to that either. We would like to have a reply to that ourselves.
Yes, but with the changes in government, everything has been very delayed in terms of getting a clear idea of what the policy will be. So we are very dependent on that.
Thank you. So with that, we're pretty much on the hour now. So I'd like to just take a moment to thank everyone for attending, for all the questions during the session at the end, and of course a big thank you to our three speakers for today. And I would like to take the opportunity to invite everyone to register for next week's webinar. I'll put a link in the chat just now, where we'll be looking at the results on Upper Silesia in Poland and their activities, results, and challenges. So on behalf of the Pilot Strategy Project, once again, thank you very much for joining and hope to see you again next week. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, João, and thank you, Júlio.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard, for your moderation. Okay, and for all the links you put on the chat, which I think are very useful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. See you.
Bye.